Everyone, we're back again. Marissa Shadrick, published writer and award-winning speaker, here with Jamie French, who is a story coach, speaker, and trainer. And here today in the second video, he is teaching us all about storytelling. Hi, Jamie. Good to have you here again.
Hi, Marissa. It is great to be back.
Now, in our first video, you gave us a wonderful introduction to storytelling. And in this video, I have a question. As far as when do we know that we're ready to tell a story or tell our story?
That is a great question. And, I've been asked that question before. And I guess I don't want to start answering the question by making a statement. And that is, there's a lot of great story coaches out there and storytelling courses and those types of things. And they all have kind of their process. And I've seen most of them, if not all of them, and they are very, very good. One thing that I do disagree with on many of those is that they tell you that you cannot be the hero of your own story. And the hero is the protagonist, or and that's kind of Hollywood language or author or writer language. But basically the hero of the story is the person who goes through the journey or the adventure or overcomes a challenge. It's the primary character of the story. And I think that you have to be the hero of your own story. Because if you're not the hero of your own story, then you're not relatable, number one. And number two, it's not your story. Because now you're sharing somebody else's story, and it's our personal stories that have the most impact. So I want to start by just kind of making that statement, is that we have to be the hero of our own story. And I think people get hung up sometimes is that they know they have a story that they want to tell, they've been through something, or they're very passionate about something and they want to share that with others. But they don't know how, and then they get hung up with this, well, how do I tell my story if I'm not allowed to be the hero? So I think first thing I want to say is it is okay to be the hero of your own story. In fact, I don't think it's your story if you're not the hero of it. Now, we'll talk in one of our future videos about what the hero actually is and what they actually do, and how do we make that character, the hero, the main character, more relatable and identifiable and similar to an audience. So I want to kind of just say that with a blanket statement. Yeah. But how do you know it's time to tell your story? I think there's really three pieces to that. One is that you have learned something that you want to share with others. There's some knowledge, you've been through something, and as a result of going through that, whether it is a crisis, it's a challenge, and it could be a physical challenge, and it can be emotional challenges. We go through things in our own head sometimes, and you've been through it, and you've figured out how to overcome it, and it's because of that lesson that you've learned that you want to help others with. And I think that's the first thing, is that you have to have this desire to help people.
So you want to be already on the other side.
Yes.
You want to be on the side where you're looking back and you're seeing the transformation or the success or the victory or overcoming something. And once you're on the other side, then you're ready to tell a story?
Yeah, you have to have already been through it. Now, you maybe don't have it all figured out, and you may still struggle with it, but you've learned something. I think that's the first thing, is you have actually learned something, number one. There's an adage in professional speaking is that you should never use the stage for therapy, meaning that you can't take the stage just to go up there and unload all your issues on stage in front of an audience. Which actually really kind of brings in a second element that I think lets you know that you're ready. Is that you can tell your story with emotion, but not get emotional. And what I mean by that is you need to be able to tell it because you've lived it, and it still gets you a little maybe choked up in it, and you still feel the emotions of the challenge. You have to still feel it, because if you don't feel it, then you're just kind of going through the motions. So That's the first piece. But you have to be able to tell it without being overly emotional and become a blubbering mess on stage or whatever that is. So you have to be able to keep your emotions in check and not get emotional, but you need to be able to tell it with emotion.
So it's kind of a different emotion. It's more of an emotion of gratitude, an emotion of, yes, this is what happened to me, as opposed to an emotion where I'm still hurting, I'm still bleeding.
Yes.
Somebody rescue me.
Yes.
That's not good either.
Yeah, you clarified that very well, is that it is really, I've been through it. I still feel it, but I'm now feeling it more from a gratitude perspective. And then the third element, or the third, I guess, notification, lets you know that you're ready, is that you are now moved with compassion to help somebody. You're not moved for recognition. You're not moved for profit. You're moved with compassion to truly help somebody else with what you've been through.
I love
There's
that.
nothing wrong with being recognized, and there's nothing wrong with being compensated for it. But that can't be the primary reason. The primary reason is you have to be moved with compassion to help others.
As opposed to need, I need to get this off my chest type thing. So you're making a distinction here. Is there a difference then between your story and a story? So are we definitely making a distinction here where we're just primarily first focusing on our story, and and you talked a little bit why it's important and everything, but how do we use our story? How can I'm just wondering the difference between the two.
That's a great question. And I think there's a lot of similarities in how to tell the story between whether it's your story or, you're sharing another story from somebody else. I think there's a lot of similarities in how you would tell that story. But is there a distinction between the two? And I think the answer to that is yes. When you're telling somebody else's story, you can tell that story to make a point, and it can make a great point. There's lots of lessons involved in it, and we'll share it in a future video on how to tell a story, how to structure it, and the manner in which we should tell it so it has the most impact. But I think when we're talking about our own story, is we're sharing a piece of us. It's something that it's so part of us that we have to be careful how we tell it, so that way we don't, I think number one is we don't alienate our audience, because if we go down the path of it's so personal to us, they won't get it. So we still have to tell our story using good storytelling techniques and processes. But the difference between the two is recognizing this is a piece of me that I am now sharing. And because of that, I have to be ready to let that piece go. I have to expose myself to a certain degree that I'm willing to do that. And if we're not willing to do that, then your story's never going to have the impact that it should have, which is really another reason why we should tell our own stories, is because it's our own stories that we share with others that have the biggest impact. Now, that's not to say that we don't have those little funny incidences that happen to us. It's not overly emotional. It's just a funny little anecdote that we share. But I would call those all what I call our little S stories that support and build and become a part of our big S story, which is kind of the story of us. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is definitely a distinction between the two.
Okay, so let's see. So with our story, we can use our story, and perhaps that's a story where we don't mind telling it over and over again. It's so much a part of us that it almost becomes like, well, to use lack of a better word, almost like our mission to share this particular insight or perspective that we have. And in business, it could become part of our branding, perhaps, why we do what we do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you stated that very, very well, is that it is something that we feel compelled to share it with others because we know that we've learned something and we can kind of shorten that learning curve for other people.
I love that.
Yeah, so we share our story to shorten their learning curve.
I love that. I love that. Shorten their learning curve so they don't have to go through the pain and struggle that maybe we had to go through.
Exactly. Or shorten, or, they don't have to go through it as long.
Right. Right. So in recap, the first one is this tension between the hero. That some people say we shouldn't be the hero of our story, and you're saying that we should be the hero of our story. And you used Hollywood as the movie, the protagonist. The protagonist is really the person going through the journey, which they call him the hero, which would mean we're the ones going through the journey. So how did that misconception come about, where people were saying, is it because in Hollywood usually there's a person going through the story and then they have someone that kind of helps them along and gives them wisdom? Is that why?
Yeah, exactly. And, just real quickly, and we'll cover this in a future video, but you have the hero who goes through a journey, and then they have to meet, again, using Hollywood language, they meet a guru or an expert or a provider who gives them information, resources, insight to help them go through the journey. So when we're on stage sharing our story, we're standing there as that guru because we're helping the audience, but the story is about us. Now, we have to, and we'll cover this a little bit later too, but it's more this idea is that even though the story's about the hero, which is me, the purpose of the story is to share the lesson.
Awesome. That really helps. Okay, so that is good to know. The hero, that we are the hero of the story. Number two, that we know that we're ready to tell a story when we're on the other side of it, when we've already gained some victory, correct?
When we've gained victory or insight, and we want to share that victory and that insight and how we did it with somebody else. Okay,
and number three is that we are moved or compelled with compassion to tell the story. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we're not driven by the recognition that we might get, which might be using the stage as therapy, or we're not driven by what we could gain monetarily by telling my story or writing my book or whatever that might be. But I'm compelled to share it because I want to help.
So the motivation is not inward focused, it's outward focused.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. Those are great tips as far as helping us to know when we're ready to tell our story. And in the next coming videos, you're going to break it down even further for us. So I'm excited to learn because I'm learning a lot. So thank you, Jamie, and we will see everyone on the next